The one thing that was abundantly clear to me over the past year is I wasn't a very good business owner. First 4 years were very easy to be in business around here, at least as a law firm. I was doing a lot of networking. I was building the business. We doubled in size every year, both in revenue and clients. So we got up to the point where we were 15 attorneys, had great cash flow. It was a blast, and I thought I was a genius. And about this time last year, clients started having financial difficulties. And all through those 4 years, and this is where it's somewhat embarrassing because I also own a bookkeeping company, our books were not in the greatest shape, but it never really mattered. I didn't need that financial data to see how we were doing on a month-to-month basis because the money was kept flowing in. I was making a few $100,000 a year. Bills were paid, didn't have money on the line of credit, had the safety net. About this time last year, first few clients started not paying on time. Accounts receivable went from 30 to 60 to 90. Started having to use the line of credit every month. Then first few clients started declaring bankruptcy, closing their doors. We had a client that owed us about $25,000, who I think ended up in jail, which is never a good thing when they owe you about $25,000 because you figure you're probably not going to get it. I still have my hopes that we'll get that money. So what I realized is that I had been running a business for 4 years. Didn't really know what I was doing as a business owner. And that I could sail by while times were good, but when times started getting a little bit more difficult, I had to start learning about budgeting and things along those lines. And that was sort of the second lesson that I've learned over the past 4 years or 5 years, and one I sort of want to highlight today is it was great starting the business. It was great, during those 4 years. But it was more to, I guess, being a business owner than simply having a great idea, going out and be able to market it. You also, I guess, needed to put the proper procedures in place and have financial intelligence. And I didn't really have that financial intelligence during that time frame. And it's something, quite honestly, I'm still working on. Econ and finance were not my greatest subjects through college. I went into law school because I figured I didn't have to deal with that crap anymore. And lo and behold, now I need to figure out a way to deal with it. And the other thing that happened, I don't know if any of this has impacted any of your businesses, I did not make decisions quick enough. So when I saw that our cash flow was starting to get impacted, I did not lay off attorneys. Figure, okay, I can have 2 or 3 attorneys do the work of one. I felt as though it was my obligation to those employees, because they're all W-2 employees, to keep them on.
That's the hardest thing in the world I ran against that. I couldn't walk in there and just go, sorry, you're fired.
Yeah.
It's just really, man, that's one thing I think you have to have a special, some kind of gumption to be able to do that. It's so important.
Spotlight on it. It is tough. I don't know how other people have dealt with that. And I rode a lot of these people and kept them on. And what was difficult is that I kept them on when I shouldn't have. Cash flow started becoming an issue. Got to the point where our line of credit, we were beginning to get tapped down the line of credit. Got to the point where, for some of our senior attorneys who'd been with me for a while, they knew that we were having cash flow issues. We were waiting for clients to pay us. And when clients weren't paying us, it makes things a little tricky. Occasionally we would have flexible payroll schedules for the senior people. What happened there, and by my not making decisions when I should have, it started impacting morale of some of those attorneys. People that have been with me for 3 or 4 years, had, I thought, great loyalty to the business, started feeling pressure about what we should do. And even though our business kept growing and we building more business and growing the practice, when people weren't paying on time, it affected our cash flow. So then we had some turnover. Some of which, and probably all of which, I should have directly taken action for myself 2 months before, 5 months before, 6 months before. I had one junior attorney who I finally let go about 2 months ago. He had been on board for about 10 months. During that time, had cost me money almost every single month. And I kept him on because I liked him. I thought he had potential to do well. He was doing a lot of work for the Bookkeeping Express entity, which I was sort of willing to donate to that entity. But otherwise, I was losing money. And I think the one thing that I'm trying to learn, although I still don't think it's gotten through my head yet, is that my obligation to the business is to be a smart business owner and not necessarily to be a friend to all of our employees. And I'm still trying to figure that out because, during the past 9 months, I've probably gotten rid of most of the attorneys, or the attorneys have left, who should not have been there. We've sort of transformed over the last year from a firm that really worked with a lot of small startup companies that probably did not have huge growth potential, to now we're working primarily with government contractors, from 10 to 150 million a year in revenue. We work with a number of startup software and other entrepreneurial companies who are looking for VC, private equity money, and really have a high growth, as opposed to the small company that's happy being a small company. And then we work with a number of nonprofits.
I wonder if calling like a general meeting, like try and catch it way ahead of time. So look, hard times are coming. If you're experienced, you probably, if you're like me, after 20 years, you see red flags so far down the road. Call a meeting where you start saying it's coming. So I want to give people an opportunity to leave or something like that. But then I got to affect morale, so that's a tough one.
I called meetings even last summer. We did a 5% pay increase across the board. And so I think people knew that. I talked to some of my senior attorneys and I said, we can either let go of 1 or 2 people, or we can do the pay decrease. And they said, we'll personally take the pay decrease. Let's keep everyone on the team. Which at the time I thought was great, spoke well about the staff and the caliber of people we had. But in hindsight, it probably wasn't the best economic decision, because it just allowed us to go further into our sort of a hole that we had. And then what's funny, and I don't know what the relationship all of you have with your bankers, is I got to the point where I have a decent sized line of credit, but I'm bumping up against it every month. And I was scared to go talk to my banker, because the last thing I want is I've heard that bankers would then call the line when they see that a business is having any sort of financial difficulty.
But this is the first time you run into this, right? So you didn't really know how to deal with it.
And
I had a big client not pay, right? It also really impacted my cash flow. But it's the first time I'm like, okay, how do I start dealing with this receivable problem? They kept on dragging on and on.
I mean, I'll have it at some point where my receivables will be able to be $800,000, and then maybe able to get paid down about $200,000 during the course of the month, back up to $800,000. And that's all in good debt. Last year, I wrote off over $300,000. That is money that after I'd already made adjustments to invoices, after everything else, this was money that I fully anticipated that we were going to receive, get from the client, that never materialized.